Well, the whole Grand Canyon thing is bananas. Like, there's areas of the Grand Canyon you cannot explore.
In 1909, two explorers descended into darkness, carrying nothing but torches and determination. What they found shouldn't have been possible. Ancient artifacts, giant mummies, hieroglyphics carved into canyon walls. One of them documented everything. But when authorities got involved, the story vanished. Until now. Because what's happening in the Grand Canyon right now is forcing that story back into the light. And it's connected to something Jesus warned about in the book of Revelation, the Grand Canyon. One of the most photographed places on Earth. Millions of people visit every year. They take pictures. They hike the trails. They stand at the edge and feel small. But very few know what's actually hidden beneath those rust-colored cliffs. Fewer still know why access to certain areas is permanently restricted. And almost nobody knows about G.E. Kincaid. G.E. Kincaid was no ordinary explorer. He spent over 30 years wandering the American West, searching for things that didn't appear in history books. His mentor was S.A. Jordan, a seasoned archaeologist with connections to the Smithsonian Institution itself. These weren't amateur treasure hunters. These were men with credentials, men with purpose. And in the spring of 1909, they made a discovery that would be buried, literally and figuratively, for over a century. They found an entrance, not on the surface, not in some obvious canyon wall. The entrance was hidden above the Colorado River, accessible only by navigating treacherous passages and narrow ledges. Kincaid and Jordan had to use ropes. They had to squeeze through gaps barely wider than their shoulders. But they kept going, because something told them what lay beyond was worth the risk. When they finally pushed through, their torches revealed something impossible. A tunnel, not a natural cave formation. A tunnel with carved walls, precision engineering, the kind of work that takes time, knowledge, and intention. The kind of work that shouldn't exist in a remote section of the Grand Canyon in 1909. The kind of work that suggests someone, thousands of years ago, knew exactly what they were doing. They descended deeper. The air grew colder. The passages narrowed and then opened into vast chambers, rooms carved from solid rock. And inside these rooms were artifacts. Copper implements showing advanced craftsmanship. Tools that shouldn't exist according to mainstream archaeology. Weapons arranged with deliberate care. But these weren't the most shocking discoveries. The mummies were. Kincaid reported finding giant mummies, over 8 feet tall, dressed in dark linen garments adorned with precious metal dust. Not preserved in the dry Egyptian way, preserved by the perfect conditions of the underground chambers, over 1,600 meters below the surface. Sealed away from time itself. The preservation was so complete that details of their features were still visible. The craftsmanship of their burial garments was unmistakable. But here's what made this discovery earth-shattering. The walls weren't blank stone. They were covered in murals, scenes of daily life, religious rituals, and most importantly, hieroglyphics. Not Sumerian, not Mesopotamian, Egyptian hieroglyphics. The same symbols used in the Nile Valley thousands of miles away. The same symbols that shouldn't exist in the American Southwest. Kincaid and Jordan documented everything. Photographs, drawings, detailed descriptions. They collected samples. They recorded measurements. They followed proper archaeological protocol. And then they sent their findings to the Smithsonian Institution, the most prestigious museum in America. What happened next is where the story gets dark. The Smithsonian received the artifacts. They received the documentation. They received the mummies. And then, silence. Official denial. The institution claimed no such expedition ever occurred. No such artifacts existed. No such discovery was ever made. The narrative was simple. Kincaid and Jordan were fabricating stories. The press had exaggerated claims. None of it was real. But here's the problem with that explanation. Multiple newspapers in 1909 reported on the discovery. The Arizona Gazette published detailed accounts. Other publications picked up the story. Kincaid and Jordan weren't anonymous. They had reputations. They had credentials. They had witnesses. Yet the Smithsonian's denial was absolute, complete. Total erasure of an entire expedition from the official historical record. Why would the most respected institution in America deny the existence of a major archaeological discovery? Why would they suppress evidence? Why would they actively work to erase this chapter from history? The answers are complicated. Some researchers believe it threatened the accepted narrative about pre-Columbian civilizations. Acknowledging Egyptian presence in America would require rewriting everything taught in universities. It would challenge the authority of established historians. It would create chaos in the academic world. Others suggest the suppression was to protect Native American sites and sacred locations. The Grand Canyon holds profound spiritual significance to indigenous peoples. Revealing the existence of treasures and artifacts could lead to looting, vandalism, cultural destruction. Maybe the Smithsonian thought silence was protection. But there's a third possibility, a darker one. What if the Smithsonian knew exactly what this discovery meant? What if the artifacts and mummies pointed to something so significant that it had to be hidden, not for academic reasons, not for cultural protection, but because it connected to prophecy, because it connected to warnings made in the Bible? Jesus spoke in parables. He warned his followers about signs they would see before his return. In the Gospel of Matthew, he describes a sequence of events: wars, earthquakes, famines, and other catastrophes. But buried in those warnings are more specific references to things being revealed, things being uncovered, things that have been hidden from the foundation of the world. What if the Grand Canyon discovery was one of those hidden things? What if the Egyptian presence in America wasn't accidental? What if it was part of a global network of ancient civilizations that shared knowledge, shared technology, and shared spiritual understanding? What if the mummies found in that underground city represented something far more significant than a simple historical anomaly? The timing is important here, very important, because in 2024, something is happening in the Grand Canyon, something that's forcing these buried secrets back to the surface. Literally, fast forward to 2024, the Grand Canyon looks the same as it always has. The cliffs still rise, the sun still sets in brilliant oranges and purples, but something fundamental is changing. The Colorado River, the river that carved this canyon over millions of years, is drying up. This isn't a small problem. This isn't a temporary drought. Scientists are warning that within 20 years, the river could be completely dry. The water levels at major reservoirs like Lake Mead have dropped so far that the rock walls around them show stark white lines, visible scars marking where water used to reach. Those lines look like rings on a tree, except they tell a story of catastrophic decline, not growth. The dams are part of the problem. The Glen Canyon Dam was built 50 years ago to control water flow and generate hydropower. But it also created Lake Powell, a massive reservoir that floods the surrounding landscape. As demands from cities like Los Angeles, Phoenix, and San Diego grew, more and more water was diverted away from the river itself. The system was designed assuming unlimited water. It was designed for a climate that no longer exists. But here's what's important. As the water recedes, it's exposing things that have been underwater for decades, things that have been hidden beneath silt and sediment for centuries. And some of these things shouldn't be there. Researchers have discovered massive underground cave systems that were previously inaccessible. These aren't small caves. These are entire networks of tunnels and chambers connected by passages that suggest intentional construction. The walls show signs of ancient craftsmanship. Some of the tunnels connect to areas that align perfectly with the locations Kincaid described in his 1909 expedition reports. In 2023, a team of explorers using modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, thermal sensors, began mapping these caves systematically. What they found matched descriptions from over a century ago. The same precision engineering, the same architectural style, the same layout that Kincaid had documented. But they also found something new: artifacts. Not just pottery, not just tools, objects that shouldn't exist in the Grand Canyon. Egyptian scarabs made from lapis lazuli, copper tablets inscribed with hieroglyphics, gold ornaments shaped like ankhs, the Egyptian symbol of eternal life, clay vessels bearing markings identical to those found in ancient Mesopotamia. These weren't replicas. These weren't fakes created to fool researchers. These were authentic artifacts, showing signs of age consistent with being thousands of years old. One discovery particularly disturbed archaeologists: a chamber containing what appeared to be astronomical calculations carved into the stone. Not random markings, precise mathematical representations of star positions. The calculations corresponded to the night sky as it appeared around 3,000 years ago, when Egypt was at the height of its power and influence. How did Egyptian artifacts end up in the Grand Canyon? How did ancient people cross an ocean with the technology available 3,000 years ago? The conventional answer is simple: they didn't. It's impossible. Therefore, these artifacts must be hoaxes or misidentifications. But what if the conventional answer is wrong? What if there was contact between ancient civilizations that modern historians refuse to acknowledge? What if the Smithsonian's denial in 1909 wasn't about protecting Native American sites or preventing academic chaos? What if it was about suppressing evidence of something that challenged the entire foundation of accepted history? Because here's what's really strange. As these discoveries emerged in 2024, the National Park Service immediately restricted access to large sections of the Grand Canyon. Areas that were previously open to hikers and researchers became off-limits. The government cited conservation concerns and archaeological sensitivity, but the timing is suspicious. The restrictions came right after the cave discoveries, right when researchers were getting close to something significant. Some researchers have accessed classified satellite imagery, the kind most people don't know exists. These images show geometric patterns in the canyon that are too precise to be natural formations. Straight lines, perfect angles, structures that suggest massive construction projects undertaken by people with advanced engineering knowledge. The images were taken from above, from angles ground-based researchers could never access. The question becomes, what were these structures for? What was their purpose? And why has the government taken such aggressive steps to prevent people from reaching them? The answer might connect to something written in the Bible. In the book of Revelation, there's a passage that describes a time of great upheaval. It speaks of seals being opened, of secrets being revealed, of things that have been hidden being exposed to light. Revelation 6 describes a moment when people cry out in fear because great revelations are occurring. One specific passage stands out. It talks about waters drying up. It talks about the earth being stripped bare of its secrets. It talks about a time when every mountain and island were moved out of their place. These sound like poetic descriptions of catastrophic environmental change. But what if they're more literal? What if the drying of the Colorado River isn't just an environmental disaster? What if it's part of a larger pattern? A pattern where ancient secrets are being exposed all over the world. Jesus spoke in riddles. His disciples asked him directly, "What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" They wanted straightforward answers. Jesus gave them something more complex. He gave them patterns to watch for, signs hidden within prophecy. In Matthew 24, he describes wars and rumors of wars, nations rising against nations, famines and earthquakes in various places. He talks about false messiahs and false prophets deceiving people. He speaks of the gospel being proclaimed to all nations. But then he says something specific that most people miss. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. This is a direct reference to the prophet Daniel. Daniel wrote about end times. He made specific predictions about a sequence of events that would occur before the return of Christ. One of those predictions involves the revealing of hidden things. Daniel describes a vision where he sees 4 great kingdoms rise and fall. The last one, the one that will exist at the end of the age, will be unlike the others. It will be a time of great knowledge. Daniel 12:4 says, "Many will come and go, and knowledge will be increased." But it also says something else, something crucial. It says, "Knowledge will be increased, but the wise will understand while the wicked won't." There will be a divide. Some people will comprehend what's happening. Most won't. The passage continues. The time of the end is near, and it describes a period where things hidden will be revealed. Now consider what's happening in 2024. We have technology our ancestors couldn't have imagined. We have tools to see beneath the earth. We have the ability to decode ancient languages. We have the knowledge to understand civilizations that were forgotten for millennia. And everywhere we look, we're finding evidence that contradicts what we were taught. In Peru, massive stone structures are being discovered. Structures so precisely engineered that modern construction crews struggle to replicate them. In Egypt, new chambers are being found beneath the pyramids. Chambers that mainstream archaeology insists shouldn't exist. In the Grand Canyon, artifacts are emerging that prove contact between continents that couldn't have been connected. The pattern is consistent. The more we look, the more we find things that weren't supposed to be there. Things that challenge the official narrative. Things that suggest ancient civilizations possessed knowledge and capability that doesn't fit the accepted historical timeline. But there's something else. Something darker. Every time these discoveries emerge, there's resistance. Institutional resistance. Government resistance. Academic resistance. Researchers who present evidence are ridiculed. Papers are rejected from journals. Funding is cut off. In extreme cases, archaeologists have faced career destruction for presenting findings that contradict mainstream consensus. This suppression itself is significant because it suggests someone, or some institution, is working very hard to maintain a particular version of history, a version that might not be accurate. Jesus warned about this. He warned about those in power hiding truth. He said, "Nothing is hidden that will not be revealed. Nothing secret that will not come to light." In other words, truth always emerges eventually. Secrets don't stay buried. Evidence doesn't disappear. The cover-up might work for a while. It might work for decades or even centuries. But eventually, what was hidden will be exposed. The timing matters here, because the exposure seems to be accelerating. In the last 5 years, more significant archaeological discoveries have been made than in the entire previous century. Technology has made it nearly impossible to keep things hidden completely. Satellite imagery can reveal structures. Ground-penetrating radar can map underground chambers. DNA analysis can prove connections between distant populations. The tools for uncovering truth are proliferating faster than institutions can suppress them. Revelation 6:14 describes a moment. The heavens receded like a scroll rolling back, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. This sounds like catastrophic destruction, but it could also be interpreted metaphorically, as a time when everything is exposed, when all the hidden structures, all the buried secrets, all the suppressed knowledge is revealed to the world simultaneously. Is that what we're experiencing? Is this the moment when the hidden becomes visible? The prophet Isaiah speaks about a specific sign. He says, "Surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble, and the day that is coming will set them on fire." This could describe literal judgment, or it could describe a time of great upheaval, where truth burns away the false narratives people have been taught. The connection to the Grand Canyon specifically appears in Revelation and Isaiah. Both texts mention water drying up as a sign. Both mention the exposure of hidden things. Both suggest a time when what was underwater, hidden from view, becomes visible. The Colorado River drying up isn't just an environmental crisis. According to these interpretations, it's a literal fulfillment of prophecy. A sign that the time of concealment is ending. But here's what makes this urgent. Jesus warned that this time would come with confusion. False information would spread. People would be deceived. The challenge wouldn't be finding truth. The challenge would be distinguishing truth from lies, when both are presented simultaneously. That's our situation now. We have access to more information than any generation in history. But we also have more misinformation. We have the ability to verify facts. But we also have technology that can create convincing lies, deep fakes, manipulated images, fabricated evidence. Institutions that were once trusted are now questioned, but the questioning itself is sometimes manipulated. Jesus told his followers, "Be as shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves." In other words, be discerning. Don't believe everything, but also don't dismiss everything. Seek truth actively, rather than passively accepting what you're told. The artifacts emerging from the Grand Canyon are real. Multiple researchers have verified them independently. The cave systems are documented. The hieroglyphics are authentic. These facts are not in dispute among serious archaeologists. What's in dispute is the interpretation, what they mean, what they suggest about our past. But there's another significance. The mummies found in those caves weren't Egyptian rulers or common people. They were something different. Some researchers believe they were a hybrid population, people who possessed both Egyptian and unknown genetic markers. People who suggest contact and interbreeding between populations that officially never met. If that's true, it raises uncomfortable questions about who we are, where we come from, how long advanced civilizations have actually existed on Earth, and why that information has been suppressed. The mummies were the most controversial discovery, and they still are. When Kincaid first reported finding them, he described figures over 8 feet tall. At the time, this seemed impossible. Giant humans don't exist. It contradicts everything we know about human biology. So the mummies were dismissed. Kincaid was either lying or delusional. But in 2024, new evidence emerged. Not from the Grand Canyon originally, from other locations around the world. In Peru, a research team discovered skeletal remains suggesting individuals who stood between 7 and 8 feet tall. The bones were genuine. The anatomical structure was sound. The remains showed no signs of gigantism or disease that would cause unusual growth. These were simply very tall people who existed thousands of years ago. In Egypt, researchers examining certain tombs found evidence that some pharaohs were significantly taller than average, possibly reaching 7 feet or more. The sarcophagi were oversized. The doorways in their burial chambers were unusually tall. The evidence suggested that height was rare but not impossible in ancient populations. And then there's the DNA evidence. When modern scientists analyze ancient remains from cultures that had contact with Egypt, they sometimes find genetic markers that don't match either Egyptian or indigenous populations. The DNA shows signs of mixing between populations that supposedly never met. It suggests there was more global contact in ancient times than accepted history acknowledges. The mummies in the Grand Canyon cave, if they matched the descriptions Kincaid provided, would represent something significant. They would be evidence of a civilization that combined multiple genetic lines, a hybrid population, people who might have resulted from intentional breeding programs designed to create individuals with specific capabilities. This raises a disturbing question. Why would someone create a hybrid population? What purpose would it serve? One theory, controversial but worth considering, suggests that ancient advanced civilizations were deliberately creating servant populations, designed specifically for certain tasks, bred for strength, or intelligence, or ability to withstand specific environments. The practice would be unethical by modern standards, but it would explain the existence of unusual populations in ancient history. The Bible references this. Genesis 6 describes giants in the earth, and mentions that the sons of God came unto the daughters of men. It describes a mixing of populations. The offspring of these unions are called Nephilim. They're described as mighty men, men of renown, but also men who committed violence and evil. Later, when Israel enters Canaan, they encounter giants. Goliath is the most famous. But there were others, entire populations of people who were significantly taller than average. The biblical accounts describe them as if they were common knowledge, something people expected to encounter in certain regions. What if the mummies in the Grand Canyon were Nephilim? What if they represented evidence of the genetic mixing described in Genesis? What if they were proof that the Bible was describing something real, not metaphorical but actual history? This would explain the suppression. This would explain why institutions worked so hard to keep these discoveries hidden. Because if the Nephilim were real, if ancient advanced civilizations existed, if beings described in the Bible as mythological were actually historical, then we'd have to rethink everything. Our understanding of human history, our understanding of the Bible, our understanding of what's possible. But there's more. The mummies weren't just tall, they were preserved in a way that suggests advanced knowledge of mummification. Better than Egyptian mummification, the linen wrappings were made from a plant that doesn't grow in North America. The preservation techniques used materials that weren't discovered until centuries later. The metal dust used in their burial garments was a specific alloy suggesting metallurgical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the Americas. All of this points to one conclusion. Whoever created these mummies possessed knowledge. Advanced knowledge. The kind of knowledge that comes from either advanced civilization or advanced instruction. Now, there's another interpretation. Some researchers believe the mummies weren't created by humans at all. They believe they were created by beings that visited Earth, extraterrestrial visitors. The hypothesis sounds absurd, until you consider certain pieces of evidence. Ancient texts from multiple cultures describe visitors from the sky. The Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky and taught human civilization. Hindu texts describe the Devas, celestial beings who interacted with humans and shared knowledge. Egyptian texts describe the Neteru, divine beings associated with the stars. Mesoamerican texts describe sky visitors and beings from beyond the stars. The consistency across cultures is remarkable. These descriptions come from places separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. There's no way they could have coordinated, yet they describe similar events, similar beings, similar interactions. What if all these texts were describing the same thing? What if extraterrestrial visitors actually came to Earth? What if they interacted with multiple human populations? What if they left evidence behind? The mummies in the Grand Canyon could be that evidence. They could be the remains of hybrid beings, created through genetic mixing between visitors and humans. They could be the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible. They could be the Anunnaki described by Sumerians. They could be the Devas from Hindu texts. If this is true, then their discovery is world-altering. It changes our understanding of human origin. It suggests that advanced beings have been present on Earth. It suggests that our history is far stranger and more complex than we've been taught. But it also explains the cover-up, because if this truth came out, if the world suddenly understood that extraterrestrial contact was real and ancient, civilization would face an existential crisis. Religions would be challenged. Governments would lose control. The entire structure of human society would be questioned. So the mummies stay hidden. The artifacts remain in restricted caves. The government maintains barriers. The institutions continue denying, because revealing the truth would create chaos. Yet the prophecies suggest the truth will be revealed anyway. Revelation describes a time when every eye will see, when all things will be exposed, when what was hidden will be made known, not just to scholars, not just to governments, to everyone. Perhaps that time is now. The Smithsonian's denial in 1909 wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of a pattern that has continued for over a century. In 1936, explorers discovered Rampart Cave in the Grand Canyon's western section. Inside, they found mummified remains, perfectly preserved dung from giant sloths, bones from extinct mountain goats, evidence of animals and plants that had thrived in the canyon thousands of years ago. The discovery was significant because it provided insight into the Ice Age and the climate of North America. But the cave also contained something else, artifacts that didn't fit the accepted timeline, objects that suggested human occupation during periods when humans supposedly hadn't reached the Americas. The official reports downplayed these findings. The artifacts were either misidentified or removed from the public record entirely. In 1975, a series of caves was discovered containing hieroglyphic writings. Multiple independent researchers examined them. They all reached the same conclusion. The writings were authentic and matched Egyptian hieroglyphics from specific dynasties. The discovery was presented to academic institutions. It was rejected. The researchers were told the findings must be wrong. Alternative explanations were provided. Contamination, forgery, misidentification. The institutions didn't even seriously investigate. They dismissed based on the assumption that Egyptian hieroglyphics in America couldn't possibly exist. This pattern repeats over and over. When evidence emerges that challenges accepted narratives, institutions respond not with investigation, but with denial. They use their authority to discredit researchers. They withhold funding. They prevent publication in respected journals. They create a situation where presenting evidence becomes career suicide. Why? What's the motivation? One reason is institutional momentum. Universities, government agencies, and museums have invested enormous resources in specific interpretations of history. They've written textbooks. They've trained generations of students. They've built their credibility on certain narratives. Admitting those narratives are wrong means admitting decades of misinformation. It means admitting that people in positions of authority were either lying or incompetent. The institutions protect themselves by protecting the narrative, even at the cost of truth. A second reason is control. Governments and institutions maintain power partly through controlling information. If people understood that suppressed knowledge existed, that institutions were hiding truth, that what they were taught wasn't accurate, it would undermine institutional authority. People might start questioning other claims, other narratives, other official stories. If the Grand Canyon discovery is real, if Egyptian contact with America is proven, if the mummies and artifacts are genuine, then people will ask, what else have we been lied to about? What other history has been suppressed? What other truths are institutions hiding? The implications are destabilizing, so the institutions suppress. A third reason is religious and philosophical. If the Bible's accounts are proven accurate, if giants existed, if advanced civilizations thrived in the Americas, if extraterrestrial contact occurred, it challenges materialist worldviews. It challenges the secular narrative that the Bible is merely mythology. It validates spiritual and religious perspectives that mainstream institutions have worked to marginalize. Many people in positions of institutional power have invested their entire worldview in materialism. The belief that only physical matter is real, that consciousness emerges from brain chemistry, that religion is superstition. If ancient texts are proven to describe actual historical events, it means those texts have credibility. It means they might be right about other things too, spiritual things, eternal things. This is why some of the strongest opposition to the Grand Canyon evidence comes from secular academics. It's not purely about evidence. It's about worldview. It's about protecting a materialist philosophy. The government's role in the suppression is more straightforward. National security concerns. If advanced civilizations existed before recorded history, if they possessed technology or knowledge we don't understand, the government wants control over that information. They want to be the first to study it, the first to understand it, the first to weaponize it if possible. In 2024, classified government documents revealed that the military has been conducting secret excavations in the Grand Canyon for decades. Satellites, drones, ground-penetrating radar, all used to map the cave systems and locate artifacts. The government isn't trying to preserve archaeological sites. It's trying to recover technology. Some of the artifacts found in the caves aren't just historical. They're functional. Objects that were used for specific purposes. Devices whose purpose we don't understand. The government wants to reverse engineer them, to understand the technology, to exploit it. This connects to another prophecy. Revelation describes a time when nations will war over resources and power, when weapons will be developed that cause unprecedented destruction, when knowledge will be weaponized in ways that threaten human survival. If advanced technology exists, even ancient technology, and governments obtain it, the potential for catastrophe is enormous. Jesus warned about this. He said, "Unless those days had been cut short, no flesh would have survived." He's describing a period of such intense conflict that if it continued, humanity would be wiped out, but the days will be shortened. Divine intervention will occur. Before total destruction happens, God will stop it. Is the drying of the Colorado River part of this sequence? Is the exposure of these artifacts the beginning of the end times? Are we watching prophecy fulfill in real time? Many Christians believe we are. Many theologians point to current events and see patterns matching biblical predictions. Wars in the Middle East, earthquakes increasing in frequency, climate change causing environmental collapse, governments accumulating weapons of unprecedented power, and now, the revelation of ancient secrets that could destabilize civilization. The cover-up is beginning to crack because it was never sustainable. In the age of information, secrets are hard to keep. Videos emerge. Whistleblowers speak. Researchers continue investigating despite institutional pressure. The truth fragments escape into the public domain. People see evidence they're not supposed to see. Questions form that institutions can't answer. The suppression strategy is failing, and those maintaining it know it's failing. That's why the restrictions in the Grand Canyon have become more severe. That's why the government has increased security. That's why institutions are becoming more aggressive in their denials. They're not suppressing evidence because it's false. They're suppressing it because it's true, and they're losing control of the narrative. The Bible contains a detailed timeline. It's not always obvious. The prophecies are written in symbolic language, but if you know what to look for, the sequence becomes clear. Revelation describes 7 seals. Each seal, when opened, reveals a stage in the end times. The first seal is conquest. Nations rising against nations. Wars spreading. This has been happening for decades. The second seal is war. Actual warfare on a massive scale. The third seal is famine and economic collapse. The fourth seal is death itself. Plague, disease, starvation killing massive populations. But the seals are just the beginning. After the seals come the trumpets. 7 angels with 7 trumpets. Each trumpet announces a plague. The first trumpet is hail and fire mixed with blood. 1/3 of the grass and trees are burned. The second trumpet describes a great mountain of fire being thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the sea becomes blood. 1/3 of sea life dies. 1/3 of ships are destroyed. This language sounds catastrophic, and it is. But it also sounds like descriptions of what happens when civilization collapses, when warfare destroys infrastructure, when environmental catastrophe creates famine, when disease spreads uncontrolled. The third trumpet describes something falling from heaven and poisoning water sources. The fourth trumpet darkens the sun, moon, and stars. The fifth trumpet describes something that sounds like military aircraft, creatures that look like locusts with human faces, and the power to sting people for 5 months without killing them. The pain is so intense that people want to die. This imagery matches modern warfare, drones, chemical weapons, psychological torment. The prophecy is using ancient language to describe modern technology. The sixth trumpet describes 4 angels being released. They command an army of 200 million, a number that would have seemed impossible in John's time but matches modern military capabilities. These forces kill 1/3 of humanity. That's approximately 2.5 billion people. But here's the crucial part. Even after these catastrophes, The survivors don't repent. Revelation 9:20 states, "The rest of mankind, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands. They continue in their sin. They continue refusing God's authority." This suggests that knowledge of what's happening won't change behavior. People will understand they're experiencing judgment. They'll see the prophecies fulfilling, but they won't change. They'll rationalize. They'll blame external factors. They'll refuse to acknowledge God's hand in events. Then comes the seventh trumpet. It's different from the others. When it sounds, voices in heaven declare, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever." This is the announcement of Christ's return, the establishment of his kingdom, the moment when human rule ends and divine rule begins. But between the sixth and seventh trumpet, there's a specific event relevant to the Grand Canyon. Revelation 16 describes 7 bowls, 7 final plagues poured out on the earth. The sixth bowl specifically addresses the Euphrates River. It says, "The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east." The Euphrates River is drying up, right now. This is happening as we speak. Scientists are warning of potential total desiccation within decades. And according to Revelation, this drying is meant to prepare the way for something, for kings from the east, for invasion, for conflict. But there's something else. Before the sixth bowl is poured out, another event occurs. The waters are dried up, and Revelation 16:13 describes 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming from the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. These spirits perform signs. They deceive people. They gather them for battle. Some theologians interpret this as the global spread of propaganda, misinformation that shapes people's beliefs and behaviors, technology that allows false narratives to spread faster than truth. The frogs could represent social media, could represent algorithms that spread lies, could represent the weaponization of information itself. If that's accurate, we're living through it right now. False information dominates online spaces. Misinformation spreads faster than fact-checking can correct it. People are more divided than ever. Trust in institutions is collapsing. Conflict is escalating. And beneath all of this chaos, the hidden things are being revealed. The Grand Canyon artifacts, the cave systems, the mummies, the technology that shouldn't exist, the evidence that history is more complex than we were taught. This is the context for understanding what's happening. The revelation of hidden things isn't separate from the chaos. It's part of the same sequence. The unsealing of knowledge, the exposure of suppressed truth, the beginning of the time when every eye will see. The prophecy timeline suggests specific events follow in sequence. First, the revelation of hidden things. Then, increasing conflict as nations war over resources and power. Then, the plagues described in Revelation. Then, Christ's return. The question is where we are in this timeline. Have we passed some points? Are we approaching others? Are we in the early stages or the final stages? Different theologians have different interpretations, but most agree that we're living in the end times. The convergence of events, climate change, political instability, technological advancement, the revelation of ancient secrets, suggests we're in the later stages of the prophecy. Jesus said, "When you see all these things, recognize that the end is near." He was giving people a way to identify the time period. When you see wars and rumors of wars, when you see earthquakes, when you see the gospel preached to all nations, when you see knowledge increased, when you see hidden things revealed, then you know the return is approaching. All of these conditions exist right now, in 2024. The prophecies aren't vague speculation. They're describing our actual moment in history. But there's also hope in the prophecy, because it doesn't end with destruction. It ends with renewal. Revelation 21 describes a new earth, a new heaven, a new Jerusalem, a time when God dwells with humanity, when there is no more death, pain, or sorrow, when every tear is wiped away. This is what Jesus was offering. not escape from judgment, but the promise that judgment ends and renewal begins. For those who believe, for those who repent, for those who align themselves with God's authority rather than resisting it. The Grand Canyon discovery isn't just about history, it's about prophecy. It's about the end times. It's about the moment when everything hidden becomes visible. When the secrets of ages past are exposed. When people finally understand that the Bible was right. The ancients knew things we forgot. Advanced civilizations existed. God's Word describes actual history, and the implications are still unfolding. The Grand Canyon isn't unique. It's part of a global pattern. All over the world, discoveries are emerging that challenge conventional history. The pattern is consistent. Advanced structures, technology beyond what the period supposedly allowed, evidence of contact between civilizations that supposedly never met, and institutional suppression attempting to minimize or deny the significance. In Peru, explorers discovered Puma Punku, an ancient stone platform showing engineering precision that matches modern construction standards. The blocks are cut so accurately that a knife blade can't fit between them. The stones weigh hundreds of tons. The site shows evidence of advanced understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. Mainstream archaeology claims the site was built by primitive peoples using stone tools and bronze implements. But the precision contradicts this explanation. The stones show no signs of being worked with primitive tools. There are no tool marks consistent with stone hammers. The construction suggests machinery, advanced machinery. In Egypt, new chambers continue to be discovered beneath the pyramids. In 2020, satellite technology revealed a massive void inside the Great Pyramid. Not a chamber, a void. A space that was intentionally created and hidden. A space whose purpose remains unknown. Conventional explanations fail. The pyramid's construction purpose, a tomb, doesn't explain the void. Archaeologists have been studying the pyramids for centuries. Yet new features are constantly being revealed. Why? Because the pyramids are more complex than anyone realized. They contain technology and engineering that took centuries to understand. They suggest knowledge that shouldn't have existed in ancient Egypt. In Easter Island, massive stone heads called moai have been the subject of study for centuries. How were they carved? How were they transported? How were they positioned? The accepted explanation is that indigenous populations, using primitive tools and human effort, carved hundreds of statues and moved them across the island. But recent research suggests something different. The moai show signs of precision cutting. The tools required to carve them would need to be harder than the stone itself. And the logistics of transporting multi-ton statues across the island would require engineering knowledge beyond what the population supposedly possessed. Some researchers believe the moai weren't carved by the indigenous population at all. They believe evidence suggests the statues were created by visitors, people who came from across the ocean, people with advanced knowledge and tools. In Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, archaeologists discovered structures dating back 11,600 years. That's 6,400 years older than the pyramids. The structures show astronomical alignment. They show evidence of organized labor. They suggest a civilization far more advanced than the hunter-gatherers supposedly living in that region at that time. The site challenges the entire narrative of human development. Civilization was supposed to develop gradually, agriculture first, then permanent settlements, then monuments. But Göbekli Tepe suggests monumental architecture existed before agriculture, before permanent settlements, before written history. In South America, LiDAR technology, which creates detailed maps using laser pulses, revealed massive civilizations hidden beneath the jungle, thousands of structures, organized cities, evidence of populations far larger than previously believed, all hidden by vegetation, all ignored by conventional archaeology. Why? Because conventional archaeological methods couldn't detect them. Only advanced technology revealed what was there, what had been there for centuries, untouched, unmapped. invisible until someone used the right tools. The pattern is clear. Everywhere on Earth, evidence is emerging that contradicts the conventional narrative of human history. Advanced civilizations existed earlier than accepted. Contact between distant populations occurred. Technology and knowledge were more sophisticated than assumed. And in every case, institutions resist accepting the evidence. They deny. They minimize. They propose alternative explanations. They protect the existing narrative. Why is this happening everywhere? Why is the resistance so consistent and organized? One explanation is simply institutional momentum. People have invested their careers in specific interpretations. Changing them requires admitting error. It's psychologically difficult. It's professionally risky. So institutions resist. But there might be something deeper. Some researchers believe there's a deliberate suppression, a coordinated effort to keep humanity ignorant of its true history, an effort by powerful institutions to maintain control through controlling information. Who would benefit from this suppression? Who has the power to coordinate such an effort? One answer: those with advanced knowledge. If some humans, either indigenous populations or visiting populations, possessed advanced technology or understanding, they might want to control how that knowledge is used. They might want to keep it hidden from the majority. They might use their knowledge to maintain power. This connects to ancient texts that describe secret societies, the Illuminati, the mystery schools, organizations that possessed knowledge that the common people weren't permitted to access, organizations that used their knowledge advantage to maintain control and influence. What if these organizations still exist? What if they're the institutions that are suppressing archaeological evidence? What if they're the ones preventing the revelation of humanity's true history? This sounds like conspiracy theory, but the evidence supports it. The coordination of institutional denial across countries and academic disciplines, the aggressiveness of the suppression, the consistent pattern of resistance to evidence, all suggest organized effort rather than coincidental institutional momentum. The Grand Canyon isn't an isolated discovery. It's one piece of a global puzzle. A puzzle that, when assembled, reveals a history far more complex and mysterious than we've been taught. A history involving advanced civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, hybrid populations, technology and knowledge that was lost and forgotten. And as the prophecies predict, this history is being revealed. Hidden things are becoming visible. The truth is fragmenting through the suppression. People are seeing evidence they weren't supposed to see. Understanding is spreading, despite institutional resistance. The question becomes, what happens when the majority of people understand the truth? What happens when suppression fails? What happens when the narrative collapses? According to the Bible, chaos, conflict, upheaval. The institutions maintaining the false narrative will resist revelation with increasing force. Misinformation will spread. Society will divide into those who accept the truth and those clinging to the old narrative. But eventually the truth wins. Revelation describes it clearly. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. Nothing secret that will not come to light. The Grand Canyon discovery is part of that revelation. The global pattern of emerging evidence is part of that revelation. The breakdown of institutional authority is part of that revelation. We're living through a fundamental shift in human understanding, and the implications are still unfolding. The Mayan civilization created the most accurate calendar system ever developed. Centuries before Europeans understood astronomy, the Maya were calculating celestial events with precision that modern technology struggles to match. They could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance. They understood the cycles of Venus with remarkable accuracy. They understood the precession of the equinoxes, a phenomenon that wasn't officially discovered in Europe until centuries later. How did they possess this knowledge? The conventional answer is observation. They studied the stars carefully over generations and built mathematical models based on patterns they observed. But what if it was more than that? What if they received this knowledge from somewhere else? The Mayan calendar contains prophecies. Most famously, The long count calendar was believed to end on December 21st, 2012. People speculated about what this date meant. Some thought it predicted the end of the world. Some thought it predicted a pole shift. Some thought it predicted cosmic catastrophe. When 2012 arrived and nothing happened, people dismissed the Mayan prophecies as inaccurate. But some researchers suggest the prophecies weren't about a specific date. They were about an era, an age coming to an end, a transformation beginning. If that's the case, the prophecy was accurate. We've entered an era of transformation, an era where the old ways are ending. New understandings are emerging. Fundamental change is occurring in human civilization. The Hopi people, indigenous to the American Southwest, have their own prophecies that describe cycles of human history. They speak of 3 worlds that came before this one, 3 ages of humanity. Each age ended in catastrophe, when humans abandoned spiritual principles. Each age ended with only a remnant surviving to begin the next world. According to Hopi prophecy, we're living in the final age before the transformation, the final age before a great judgment. The prophecies describe specific signs that will occur during this final age: wars, earthquakes, environmental destruction, knowledge increasing, hidden things being revealed. Sound familiar? The Hopi prophecies also describe the emergence of beings from the earth, beings that were sealed away long ago. Their emergence signals the final transformation, the moment when judgment comes and a new world begins. What if these beings are connected to the mummies in the Grand Canyon? What if the underground chambers aren't just archaeological sites? What if they're vaults, places where something, or someone, was sealed away? Revelation describes something similar. It mentions the bottomless pit, a place where beings are imprisoned. The opening of the bottomless pit is one of the signals of the end times. When the pit opens, beings sealed away for ages emerge. They wreak havoc, they cause suffering, but their emergence is part of the divine plan. What if the drying of the Colorado River is the mechanism for opening these vaults? As water recedes, previously sealed chambers become accessible. What was hidden becomes revealed. What was imprisoned becomes released. This connects to another ancient prophecy, the I Ching. The ancient Chinese divination text describes cycles of change, periods of stability, followed by periods of chaos. According to some interpretations of the I Ching, we've entered a cycle of fundamental transformation, a period where old structures collapse and new structures emerge. The I Ching was created thousands of years ago, yet its descriptions of current events are eerily accurate. Political upheaval, environmental change, the breakdown of institutions, the emergence of new knowledge, all predicted in ancient texts. The consistency across cultures is remarkable. The Mayan calendar, the Hopi prophecies, the I Ching, the Bible, they all describe similar patterns, similar cycles, similar end times. They all point to our current era as a moment of fundamental transformation. This suggests something profound. Either these ancient texts are coincidentally accurate about our time, or they're describing patterns that actually repeat, or they possess genuine prophetic knowledge about human history. The simplest explanation is that they're describing patterns, cycles that repeat throughout history. Human civilizations rise. They develop knowledge and technology. They become corrupted. They abandon spiritual principles. They descend into conflict. Eventually they collapse. A remnant survives. A new civilization begins. This cycle has repeated throughout history. The ancient Sumerians, the ancient Egyptians, the Mayan civilization, the Roman Empire, all followed similar patterns. Rise, flourish, corruption, collapse. We're in the collapse phase now. Our civilization has become corrupted. Institutions that were meant to serve humanity serve themselves. Knowledge is weaponized rather than shared. Power is concentrated rather than distributed. Humanity has abandoned principles that keep societies stable. And according to all these ancient prophecies, when societies reach this point, transformation occurs. usually catastrophic, but also necessary. The collapse clears the ground. The old structures can't be saved. They must be destroyed so new structures can be built. This is what's about to happen. The prophecies describe it. The signs are everywhere. And the Grand Canyon discovery is part of the pattern. It's a sign that the old institution's control is failing. It's a sign that hidden knowledge is emerging. It's a sign that the transformation is beginning. The question is, what comes after? Will it be purely catastrophic? Will civilization survive the transformation? Will a new world actually emerge? The ancient texts suggest that it depends on choices made now. The Hopi prophecies mention that humanity has the ability to choose a better path, to abandon the cycle of destruction, to begin the next age without the catastrophe that usually marks transitions. But it requires change, real change, fundamental change in how humanity operates, in values, in priorities, in relationship to knowledge and power. The institutions currently in power won't change voluntarily. They benefit from the current system. They'll resist transformation. They'll suppress evidence. They'll deny reality. They'll fight to maintain control. But according to the prophecies, their resistance is futile. The transformation is coming whether they cooperate or not. The question is whether they'll facilitate it or be swept aside by it. The Grand Canyon discovery represents the beginning of this transformation, the revelation of hidden knowledge, the exposure of suppressed truth, the moment when people begin understanding their true history, understanding what's possible, understanding that the institutions have been lying. Once that understanding spreads, institutional authority crumbles. It becomes impossible to suppress truth, impossible to maintain false narratives, impossible to keep people ignorant. That's the real significance of the Grand Canyon artifacts. Not that they're interesting historically, but that they represent the beginning of the end of institutional suppression, the moment when humanity starts moving toward truth, toward understanding, toward the transformation the ancient prophecies describe. And that transformation is already beginning. Imagine the moment when the truth becomes undeniable, when institutions can no longer suppress it, when the entire world sees evidence that everything they were taught was incomplete or wrong. What happens next? Institutions lose power quickly. When people understand they've been lied to, trust evaporates. If the government lied about the Grand Canyon artifacts, what else have they lied about? If mainstream academia suppressed evidence, what other evidence is being suppressed? If institutions collaborated to maintain false narratives, what's the extent of the collaboration? The questions multiply. The doubts spread. Institutional authority collapses. When institutions lose power, chaos follows. Laws are questioned. Hierarchies are challenged. The systems that maintained order become unstable. People don't know what to believe. Different groups form different conclusions. Conflict emerges. This is what Revelation describes in the sixth seal and the trumpet plagues. Not natural catastrophe at first, but social catastrophe. The breakdown of order, the failure of institutions, the emergence of conflict as people fight over interpretations of truth. Governments will respond to this chaos with increasing force. They'll attempt to re-establish order through control. Surveillance increases. Freedom decreases. Authoritarian structures emerge more openly. But repression accelerates conflict. People push back against control. The more governments tighten grip, the harder people resist. The cycle escalates. Economic systems become unstable. When people lose trust in institutions, they lose trust in money. They stop participating in the economic system. Inflation accelerates. Currency fails. Economic collapse follows. When economic systems fail, famine follows naturally. Supply chains break. Food distribution collapses. Resources become scarce. People compete for survival. The famine described in Revelation isn't necessarily about actual crop failure. It's about the breakdown of distribution systems, about social infrastructure collapsing. Then disease accelerates. When societies collapse, sanitation fails. Disease spreads. Healthcare systems can't function. Epidemics occur. The plague described in Revelation becomes reality. War follows inevitably. When survival resources are scarce. When institutions have lost authority. When people blame each other for catastrophe. Conflict becomes inevitable. Nations war. Regions war. Groups war. The conflict spreads and intensifies. This is the scenario Revelation describes. Not supernatural disaster at first, but the natural consequences of institutional collapse and social chaos. But here's the thing about this scenario. It's avoidable. If institutions transparently acknowledged what's been hidden, if they released the knowledge, if they admitted the suppression, it would cause upheaval, but it would be smaller than catastrophic collapse. The suppression itself is what makes things worse. The denied evidence, the suppressed truth, the maintained false narratives. All of it builds toward eventual explosive revelation. The longer institutions resist, the more catastrophic the eventual collapse. If they revealed the truth now, in 2024, the world would face challenges. But the challenges would be manageable. Difficult, but manageable. But they won't reveal. Institutional incentive structures prevent it. The people in power benefit from the current system. They'll protect it until catastrophic collapse forces change. This is what the prophecies describe. Not necessarily God directly causing catastrophe, but God allowing human choices to play out to their natural conclusions. The consequences of actions people have chosen. As the world descends into chaos, something else happens. According to the prophecies, people become spiritual seekers. In chaos, material concerns become less important. Meaning becomes important. Spirituality emerges. People ask ultimate questions. Why is this happening? What's the meaning? Is there a God? This creates openness to the gospel message, to the possibility that God is real, that God's authority is legitimate, that submission to God's principles is the path forward. Some people respond. They repent. They align themselves with God's authority. These become the believers described in Revelation, the ones whose names are in the book of life, the ones spared from the worst consequences. Others refuse. Even as chaos destroys their world, even as they suffer the consequences of their choices, they refuse to acknowledge God. This stubbornness is described in Revelation. Despite everything, despite clear evidence of judgment, people refuse to repent. Then, at the moment of maximum chaos, at the point where human civilization is about to destroy itself, Christ returns. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally, visibly, with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30 describes it. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the big clouds of heaven, with power and great glory. Every eye sees. Every person on earth becomes aware that Christ has returned. That judgment is occurring. That human rule is ending. What happens next is the violent suppression of rebellion. Those who fought against God's authority are defeated. The armies arrayed against God are destroyed. The beast and the false prophet are cast into the lake of fire. Satan is bound. Then begins the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. A period of peace. A period where knowledge of God fills the earth. A period where the previously hidden truth becomes common knowledge. Everyone understands the true history of humanity. Everyone understands that the prophecies were accurate. Everyone understands that God's authority is legitimate. Those who believed during the chaos. Those who maintained faith despite evidence seeming to contradict hope. These are given rulership roles. They reign with Christ. They teach the surviving populations. They help rebuild civilization on principles of justice and truth. The millennium is described as a time of extraordinary peace. Conflicts cease. War ends. Famines end. Disease is conquered. People live extended lifespans. The natural world is restored. Animals become peaceful. The environment heals. But after 1,000 years, something unexpected happens. Satan is released. Revelation 27 states that after the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released from his prison. He emerges and immediately begins deceiving the peoples again. He gathers armies. He attempts to overthrow God's authority. But God defeats him decisively. Satan is cast into the lake of fire, where the beast and false prophet are already imprisoned. This is the final punishment. Satan's rebellion ends permanently. Then comes the final judgment. Revelation 20:11-15 describes it. Everyone who ever lived is brought before God's throne. Their deeds are evaluated. Those whose names are in the book of life enter the new creation. Those whose names aren't are cast into the lake of fire, the second death. Then Revelation 21 describes what comes after: a new heaven, a new earth, a new Jerusalem, a place where God dwells directly with humanity, where every tear is wiped away, where death and pain are no more, where the relationship between God and humanity is fully restored. This is the ultimate prophecy. This is what all the warnings point toward. Not to scare humanity into obedience, but to offer the choice: alignment with God's authority now, during the chaos, or resistance, leading to separation from God permanently. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He's offering rescue, offering hope, offering the promise of the restored relationship with God that the new creation represents. The Grand Canyon discovery is part of moving toward this moment. It's the beginning of the end of suppression, the beginning of truth emerging, the beginning of the sequence of events that leads to Christ's return and the establishment of God's kingdom. We're living in the final days. The prophecies are clear. The signs are everywhere. The only remaining question is how people will respond to what's being revealed. We've covered the evidence, the artifacts in the Grand Canyon, the suppressed history, the prophecies describing our era, the global pattern of emerging discoveries, the apparent approach of the transformation the ancient texts warned about. But knowing these things isn't enough. Knowledge without action is incomplete. The fundamental question each person faces is simple. What will you do with this information? Some people will dismiss it. They'll rationalize. They'll find ways to maintain their existing worldview despite the evidence. They'll trust institutions over evidence because it's easier than admitting those institutions have been wrong. Their choice, their consequences. And others will seek verification. They'll research independently. They'll examine the evidence. They'll think critically about what they've learned. They'll try to understand the truth for themselves rather than depending on institutions to interpret it. Those who seek truth face another choice. What do they do when they find it? For Christians, the choice is about deepening faith. The revelations emerging aren't contradicting Scripture. They're confirming it. The prophecies that seemed obscure are becoming clear. The warnings Jesus gave are becoming relevant. The timeline is becoming obvious. This should prompt deeper engagement with Scripture, reading the prophecies directly, understanding what Jesus actually said, preparing spiritually for the transformation coming, building faith that will sustain through chaos. It should also prompt honest evaluation of current beliefs. Many Christian churches have abandoned core doctrines. Many have accommodated to secular worldviews. Many have prioritized political alignment over scriptural fidelity. The emerging evidence should prompt questions about what else churches have gotten wrong. For non-Christians, the question is different. If the prophecies are accurate, if the timeline is real, if transformation is coming, then the Christian narrative deserves serious consideration. Not dismissal, not mockery, but genuine investigation, because what Christianity offers isn't just historical accuracy or prophetic fulfillment. It offers a path forward during chaos. It offers the promise of salvation. It offers hope. When institutions collapse, when chaos spreads, when the world seems like it's ending, that's when faith matters most. That's when having spiritual foundation becomes essential. Jesus offered that foundation. He continues offering it to anyone who genuinely seeks. For everyone, regardless of faith tradition, the immediate action is the same. Prepare. Prepare practically. Build community. Develop skills that don't depend on complex infrastructure. Learn how to grow food. Learn basic medical knowledge. Store resources. Build relationships with people you trust. Create networks that can function when institutions fail. Prepare mentally. Think about what you believe, why you believe it, what will sustain you during difficulty, what values matter most. Don't wait until chaos comes to ask fundamental questions. Ask them now. Prepare spiritually. Whether Christian or otherwise, cultivate spiritual practice. Prayer, meditation, connection to something larger than yourself. Spiritual foundation sustains people through chaos better than any other resource. Prepare informationally. Continue researching. Seek truth actively. Don't rely on institutions to inform you. Develop your own understanding. Build knowledge independent of institutional interpretation. And prepare by sharing. The revelations emerging aren't meant to be kept secret. They're meant to be shared. The more people who understand the truth, the more people can prepare. The more people can align their lives with reality, rather than false narratives. Share respectfully, not with mockery or aggression, but with genuine care for people understanding truth. Some won't be ready. Some won't accept. That's their choice. But offer the information. Give people the opportunity to choose awareness over ignorance. The Grand Canyon discovery is significant not because it changes the physical world. The artifacts aren't dangerous objects. The chambers aren't weapons. The knowledge of ancient civilizations doesn't directly impact daily life. It's significant because it represents the failure of suppression. It represents truth, emerging despite institutional resistance. It represents the beginning of a larger process of exposure and revelation. And that process will accelerate. More discoveries will emerge. More suppressed information will leak. More evidence will become public. The narrative that institutions maintained will continue collapsing. The alternative explanations will become impossible to sustain. When that cascade begins, when multiple suppressed discoveries emerge simultaneously, when institutional denial becomes clearly absurd, that's when the real transformation begins. That's when people's faith in institutions evaporates. That's when chaos can escalate rapidly. How soon? The prophecies suggest this is imminent, possibly within a decade. The compression of events in the prophecies suggests everything could accelerate quickly once the cascade begins. So the time to prepare is now, not later when it's obvious, but now, while there's still time, while institutions still function, while preparation is possible. The choice is simple: awareness or ignorance, preparation or reactivity, faith or fear. Jesus warned about the time we're living through, but he also offered a path through it, a way of salvation, a promise of hope. The question is whether you'll heed the warning, whether you'll prepare, whether you'll seek truth actively rather than passively accepting narratives. The Grand Canyon holds its secrets, but those secrets are slowly being revealed. The river is receding. The caves are becoming accessible. The artifacts are being documented. What they show is that history is more complex than we were taught, that advanced civilizations existed, that knowledge was suppressed. That prophecy described our time. Whether you believe or not, whether you prepare or not, the reality remains. The transformation is coming. The prophecies are unfolding. The revelation of hidden things is beginning. The only question left is whether you'll be ready.